I'm posting this here because it's one of those things that's been sitting in my chest for years, and the older I get, the heavier it feels. I'm William. Not my real name, obviously. This is one of those confessions you make to strangers because you'd never say it out loud at a dinner table. For a while in my 20s, forging diplomas felt like the easiest money I'd ever made. Not glamorous, not dramatic, just paper, ink, and people desperate enough to believe in a shortcut. I didn't start out thinking of it as a crime. That's the messed up part. I told myself it was more like editing reality. Helping people look like who they already believed they were. This particular story is about the job that made everything go sideways. At the time, I was broke, angry, and convinced the world rewarded confidence more than honesty. I dropped out of college myself, buried under loans and a quiet shame I didn't know how to explain. Every job posting I saw felt like a locked door with a degree-shaped keyhole. Meanwhile, I knew people who barely scraped through school, framed their diplomas, and walked into careers like it was nothing. That bitterness? That was the spark. A friend of a friend joked one night that a diploma was just fancy paper with Latin on it. We laughed. Then I didn't stop thinking about it. What started as a favor, one fake document to help someone pass a background check, turned into something that felt almost professional. Requests came in quietly. Words spread carefully. And before I really admitted it to myself, forging diplomas had become an easy business. Too easy. This story is about the moment I realized that easy doesn't mean safe, and that paper can ruin lives just as effectively as any weapon. Once I realized this wasn't just a one-off favor, I started treating it like a craft. That's the word I used in my head, craft, because it sounded safer than fraud. I told myself if I was going to do this, I had to do it right. Sloppy work gets noticed. Clean work disappears into the background. Preparation became my comfort zone. I studied real diplomas the way some people study art. Fonts, seals, spacing, the weird little inconsistencies between universities. I learned which schools embossed their seals and which ones just printed them. Which used parchment-style paper and which cheaped out. I spent nights zooming in on graduation photos online, screenshots of proud parents holding frames at just the right angle. I didn't even own a printer at first. I bought one specifically for this, nothing flashy, just reliable, with good color depth. Paid cash. Same with the paper. I tested ink combinations like a mad scientist, comparing shades under different lighting. You'd be shocked how many fake documents fail because they look fine at night but wrong under office fluorescence. For this job, I knew the client would actually use the diploma, not just hang it on a wall. That changed everything. Verification risk goes way up when HR departments get involved. So I went deeper. I found archived commencement programs, faculty names from the year listed, even the registrar's signature style. I practiced it over and over until my wrist hurt. The scariest part wasn't the technical stuff, it was the waiting. Once I agreed to do it, there was this quiet stretch where nothing happened, and all I could think about was how many ways this could blow up. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself, I'd done this before. No one had ever questioned my work. That confidence wasn't earned, not really. It was borrowed. And I didn't realize yet how expensive borrowed confidence can be. I didn't meet most of my clients in person. That was a rule I made early on, like it somehow made me safer or cleaner. This one broke that rule before I even realized it. He reached out through an encrypted messaging app. Overkill, honestly, but it told me he was nervous. Nervous people either disappear or overpay. He did both, just not in that order. He introduced himself as Mark, definitely not his real name, and from the first message, I could tell this wasn't just about pride or impressing family. This was about survival. He said he had a job offer lined up. Not a dream job, but a solid one, healthcare administration, mid-level, decent pay. The only problem was the background check. Somewhere along the line, his degree had become non-negotiable. No diploma, no job. Simple as that. I asked the questions I always asked. School name. Graduation year. Degree title. He answered too fast, like he'd rehearsed it. That should have been a red flag, but instead it made me feel needed. Like I was the missing piece in a puzzle someone else had already built. When we finally met, neutral coffee shop, middle of the afternoon, he looked exactly how you'd expect someone in his position to look. Clean, tired, slightly hunched, like he was always bracing for bad news. He slid a folder across the table with documents I hadn't even asked for, transcripts he mocked up himself, emails from the employer, a timeline of when he'd need the diploma. HR might call the school, he said quietly. That sentence landed heavier than anything else he'd said. I nodded like it was no big deal, like I had an answer for everything. Inside, my brain was already racing through contingencies. Registrar verification. Phone calls. Databases. This wasn't just about paper anymore. It was about playing a role if someone came knocking. When I agreed to take the job, I felt that familiar mix of power and dread. I told myself I was just providing a service. He was the one lying to his employer. I was just helping him tell the story better. That's the lie I needed to believe to keep my hands steady when I shook his and told him I'd be in touch. After meeting Mark, I stopped thinking of the diploma as a document and started thinking of it as a system. Paper was just the front door. What worried me were the windows, email domains, phone numbers, databases that could get pinged without warning. I went home and tore apart everything he'd given me. His fake transcripts were bad. Not laughably bad, but bad enough that anyone who'd seen a real one would feel that subtle itch of something being off. I deleted them from my laptop and told him not to use them under any circumstances. That made him nervous. Nervous clients ask questions. Questions create pressure. To calm him, and maybe myself, I laid out a plan. First, the diploma itself, correct font, correct Latin honors formatting, the right dean's name for that year. Second, a supporting trail. I registered a lookalike domain for the university's registrar office. One character off, easy to miss if you weren't staring directly at it. I set up an inbox that could answer basic verification emails with rehearsed, bland professionalism. Third, the phone number. That was the part one hated most. I bought a cheap prepaid phone and wrote myself a script. Registrar offices don't sound friendly or hostile, they sound bored. I practiced sounding bored. Every step made it harder to back out. Each little improvement felt like tightening a knot. I remember thinking, if I stop now, all of this was for nothing. That's how sunk costs work, you don't notice them dragging you under until you're already wet. By the time I printed the final diploma, my hands didn't shake anymore. That scared me more than if they had. The lie looked good. Too good. Framed, sealed, perfect. I wrapped it carefully, like something fragile, and realized that in a way, it was. One wrong glance, one extra phone call, and the whole thing would shatter. And when it did, it wouldn't just be paper that broke. We met again a week later, same coffee shop, different energy. Mark looked worse, dark circles, jittery hands, the kind of stress that leaks out no matter how hard you try to contain it. I arrived early and chose a seat with my back to the wall. Another habit. I don't know who taught me that one, but it stuck. The diploma was in a slim cardboard tube, tucked inside my backpack like it was nothing more than a poster. That was intentional. The less ceremony, the less real it felt. I ordered a coffee I didn't want just so my hands had something to do. When he sat down, he didn't bother with small talk. He just looked at me and said, "Did it work out?" I nodded and slid the tube across the table with my foot, casual, almost lazy. No dramatic reveal. No. Here it is. Just a quiet transfer of weight from my side of the table to his. For a second, neither of us touched it. That pause felt louder than anything else in the room. He opened it carefully, like he was afraid it might crumble. When he finally saw it, really saw it, his face changed. Relief first, then something like awe. He ran his fingers over the seal, the raised texture catching the light just right. "This looks real," he said. "It is," I replied automatically, then corrected myself in my head without saying it out loud. He asked a few questions: what to say if HR asked for a copy, how long the email domain would stay active, what voice I'd use if someone called. I answered calmly, confidently, like this was all routine. Inside, my heart was hammering. Because now it was out there. No undo button. No control over how it would be used. When he handed me the envelope with the cash, I didn't count it. Another rule. Counting makes it feel like payment. I stood up first, wished him luck, and walked out without looking back. Halfway down the block, the adrenaline hit me all at once. My legs felt weak. My mouth was dry. I kept thinking about that moment when he said it looked real, and how badly he needed that to be true. I told myself I'd done my part. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. That lie lasted about 3 days. 3 days after the handoff, my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth. I remember the foam dripping down my chin, the screen lighting up the bathroom mirror with an unknown number. That alone was enough to spike my heart rate. Unknown numbers are never good when your name isn't supposed to exist. I didn't answer. It rang out, stopped, then buzzed again almost immediately. Same number. That persistence felt intentional, like someone on the other end knew I was hesitating. I spat, wiped my mouth, and answered on the third ring, already sliding into the voice I'd practiced. "Registrar's office," I said, flat, bored, professional. There was a pause. Papers rustling. A throat clearing. "Hi, yes, this is HR calling to verify a degree for a Mark." He said the last name. "Correct." My stomach tightened. "I just need to confirm graduation year and degree title." This was it. The thing I'd been preparing for, rehearsing in my head like a bad play. I glanced at the cheat sheet taped inside my bathroom cabinet. Dates, names, Latin phrasing. My mouth moved before my brain had time to panic. I confirmed the details. Slowly. Casually. I even sighed once, like I was annoyed at having to do this at all. "Thank you," the HR guy said. "And just to confirm, this is an accredited degree?" There it was. The follow-up. The question I'd hoped wouldn't come. "Yes," I said, a half second too fast. I corrected by adding, "regionally accredited," in the same bored tone. Another pause. Longer this time. "All right," he said finally. "That's all I needed." When the call ended, I just stood there staring at the mirror, toothbrush hanging uselessly in my hand. My reflection looked normal. That felt wrong. I just lied to a complete stranger in a way that could change someone's life, and my face hadn't cracked at all. An hour later, Mark messaged me, they verified it. I start Monday. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt exposed. Like I'd just stepped into traffic and somehow made it to the other side, only to realize I was still standing in the road. Because once verification happens, the lie doesn't end. It settles in. It starts living with you. And I had a growing sense that this one wasn't done with me yet. The week after Mark started his new job was worse than the lead-up. Before, there had been tasks, printing, rehearsing, planning. Now there was just silence. Silence is dangerous. Silence gives your brain room to invent consequences. Every notification made my stomach drop. Every siren outside my apartment sounded personal. I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize, even legitimate ones. I told myself that if something went wrong, I'd know. There would be a knock, or another HR call, or Mark panicking in my inbox. Instead, nothing happened. Mark sent short updates, probably without realizing how much weight each one carried for me. First day went fine. Training this week. They like me. Each message felt like a reminder that the lie was no longer theoretical. It was walking around in an office, shaking hands, logging into systems it had no right to be in. I started imagining downstream effects. What if he made a mistake? What if someone double-checked? What if there was an audit in 6 months or a year? Diplomas don't expire, but scrutiny has a way of circling back when you least expect it. I found myself rewriting the story in my head, over and over. In some versions, Mark got promoted and nothing ever came of it. In others, he got caught and folded immediately, handing over every message, every name, including mine, even if it wasn't real. I told myself I'd been careful, that I'd covered my tracks, but confidence is fragile when it's built on lies. What surprised me most was the guilt. Not the dramatic, movie-style guilt. Just this low-grade, persistent awareness that I'd tilted someone else's life onto a different track. Mark didn't just get a job, he got expectations. Responsibility. Access. And all of it rested on something I'd made in my apartment with a printer and too much time. I tried to distract myself, took on smaller jobs, but my heart wasn't in it. Every new request felt heavier, riskier. The easy money didn't feel easy anymore. That's when the second call came. The second call didn't come from HR. That's what made it worse. It was late afternoon, number blocked. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Curiosity and fear share a border, and I've always been bad at respecting it. William? A woman asked. Hearing my real name, my actual name, felt like being pushed underwater. I didn't answer right away, and she didn't rush me. That told me this wasn't a mistake. This is Denise, she said. I work in compliance. I'm calling about a discrepancy we found during a routine audit. Audit. That word has weight. It's not urgent, not emotional, just systematic. The kind of thing that doesn't stop once it starts. She didn't accuse me of anything. She didn't even mention the diploma. She just asked if I'd ever been affiliated with the university Mark claimed to attend. Alumni records. IT logs. A casual tone, like she was confirming a mailing address. I lied carefully, slowly, hating how natural it felt. When the call ended, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on the floor. This wasn't panic anymore. This was consequence, warming up in the wings. After that call, I went into what I can only describe as containment mode. I didn't sleep much. When I did, I dreamed in fragments, phones ringing, printers jamming, my own voice answering questions I couldn't hear. I replayed Denise's tone over and over, trying to find emotion in it. Anger would have been easier. Anger means mistakes. Calm means process. I wiped everything I could think of. Encrypted chats gone. Email accounts deleted. The lookalike domain redirected to nothing and then disappeared entirely. I smashed the prepaid phone with a hammer and dropped the pieces into different trash bags around the city like I'd seen in bad crime shows. It felt stupid, theatrical, but doing nothing felt worse. I drafted messages to Mark and deleted them all. Reaching out could look like coordination. Silence, I decided, was safer. Let him think everything was fine. The worst part was realizing how little control I actually had. The lie was out there now, interacting with systems I'd never see. All I could do was wait and pretend I wasn't counting the hours. That's when Mark finally broke the silence. Mark's message came in at 11:47 p.m. 3 words at first: we need to talk. I stared at the screen longer than I cared to admit. Those words carry history. They're never about good news, never about relief. I typed and erased half a dozen replies before settling on something neutral. What's going on? His response was a paragraph, rushed and uneven, like he'd typed it in one breath. Someone from compliance had requested additional documentation. Not the diploma, supporting records. Enrollment verification. A student ID number. Things that don't exist if you were never there. They said it's routine, he wrote. But they asked questions? Different questions. I felt a cold clarity settle in. This wasn't panic anymore, it was trajectory. I told him to stay calm, to answer only what was asked, to say he'd need time to retrieve old records. I sounded confident. Helpful. The way you do when you're giving advice you don't fully believe in. After we stopped messaging, I realized something ugly and true. If this collapsed, it wouldn't just expose me. It would expose him. And suddenly, self-preservation didn't feel as simple as disappearing. The next few days felt like watching a glass slowly spiderweb from the inside. No single shattering moment, just tiny fractures spreading where I couldn't reach them. Mark stopped updating me regularly, which I told myself was good. Less contact, less evidence. Still, the silence felt different this time. He wasn't calm anymore. He was busy. When he finally messaged again, it was clipped. Compliance had looped in an external verification service. Standard procedure, they said. Everything was always standard right up until it wasn't. He asked me if I could generate enrollment records. That was the moment I knew we were past my skill set. Diplomas are static. Enrollment records are alive, databases, cross-checks, student numbers that link to other numbers. You can't fake a living system with a printer and confidence. I told him it was risky. I told him it might be better to come clean, to frame it as a misunderstanding, a clerical error. Even as I typed it, I knew how hollow it sounded. He didn't reply for hours. When he did, he said, "If I go down, I'm not going down alone." And just like that, the crime stopped being abstract. That line, "If I go down, I'm not going down alone," sat on my screen like a loaded gun. I read it again and again, looking for an angle that wasn't there. It wasn't a threat exactly. It was worse. It was a statement of fact. For the first time, I considered turning myself in. Not out of morality, but strategy. If I controlled the narrative early, maybe I could limit the damage. But the idea of voluntarily stepping into that machinery, lawyers, records, consequences, made my chest tighten. Confession only feels noble when it's hypothetical. I tried to de-escalate. Told Mark I couldn't fabricate enrollment data, that it would raise more flags, not fewer. I reminded him that companies sometimes drop things if they don't get immediate answers. That audits stall. That people get busy. He didn't buy it. He said compliance had given him a deadline. 3 days. After that they'd move forward. I spent those 3 days barely eating, barely sleeping, running scenarios like simulations. In every version, I lost something: money, freedom, the person I thought I was. On the third night, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Mark. The call came from a number with an actual caller ID this time. Company name. Compliance Department. No attempt to hide it. That felt intentional, like they wanted me to know the game had moved into a brighter room. They asked if I could come in, just to clarify a few things. Not if I was involved. Not what I'd done. Just clarification. The word is a trap. It implies there's a reasonable explanation waiting to be discovered. I said yes. Saying no would have sounded like guilt, and at that point guilt was already in the air. The interview room was small and aggressively normal. Glass table. Neutral art. 2 people, polite, prepared. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't accuse. They asked me to walk them through how I knew Mark, how I'd helped him, why my email domain looked the way it did. I lied until I couldn't anymore. Not because they cornered me, but because the story collapsed under its own weight. Contradictions pile up fast when someone else is taking notes. When I finally stopped talking, the silence felt earned out. I wasn't arrested that day. That's the part people always expect to be dramatic, and it wasn't. No cuffs. No speeches. Just paperwork and that hollow feeling you get when you realize the worst part isn't over, it's just been scheduled. They told me they'd be referring the case onward. Legal would decide what stuck. The company terminated Mark the same afternoon. I found that out later, indirectly, through a mutual contact who didn't know I was involved. Hearing it secondhand made it feel heavier somehow. Like I'd dropped something fragile and walked away before hearing it shatter. Mark sent one last message. Not angry. Not threatening. Just, I should have known better. I didn't reply. There was nothing honest I could say that wouldn't also be self-serving. In the weeks that followed, my life shrank. I avoided people. I replayed conversations. I imagined alternate versions of myself, the one who said no, the one who quit early, the one who never bought that printer. None of them felt real anymore. It's been a few years since all of that, long enough for the immediate fear to fade, but not long enough to forget. I wasn't charged in the end. Warnings, records, consequences that don't show up on paper but still follow you. Mark moved away. I don't know where. I don't look. What changed most wasn't my situation, but how I see myself. For a long time, I told myself I was clever, careful, different from real criminals. This experience stripped that illusion down to nothing. I wasn't smarter than the system. I was just temporarily lucky. If there's anything I learned, it's this: lies scale faster than you think. What starts as just paper turns into systems, people, livelihoods. Once other lives depend on your lie holding up, you're no longer in control of anything. If you're reading this and thinking about shortcuts, especially ones that involve documents, credentials, or trust, don't. Not because you'll definitely get caught, but because even if you don't, you'll carry it. And it gets heavier every year.